was a little bit younger than me, he started seeing dollar signs and wanted to profit off of the gallery spaces in some way and raise the rent to kind of a market value situation and move some of the more successful spaces up to a bigger street where they'd be more prominent and they would have more sales and things like that. But he's like, I'll subsidize you for the first year, and then you have to figure it out. And it's like, oh, but we don't really sell work, and I'm not sure how this is going to work out for us. So it didn't happen, but it scared a lot of spaces away because he started threatening us with, like, you have to have liability insurance if you're going to do this, because if somebody falls on my property, that's going to be my ass, you know. And but, you know, most of the drunk people would never remember anyway where they fell, so. But, so it just kind of drove everybody out of the neighborhood. They still have some spaces up on Halstead Street. If you've been to Chicago, you're probably familiar with that street. It goes far and wide through Chicago, but the south end of it.
So how did it sort of transplant from Chicago to San Antonio?
Well, I decided, when I went to San Antonio College to repair a bad college GPA from my past college life, and just kind of moved here on a whim and decided, well, since I'm here, I might as well repair this GPA and go back to school. And I was an artist, so I wanted to finish that degree I started some 10 years ago. And SAC was where I went and repaired my GPA and went to school there, then went to the Art Institute in Chicago. When I left San Antonio, I was like, get me out of here, let's go Chicago. I mean, look, I wasn't from here, so I had a connection to the city. I made a lot of friends, but I moved here with an ex-boyfriend and it didn't work out, so I was a little bitter about all that. So I was like, goodbye San Antonio, it's been great. And then Anjali Gupta, actually, who was running Contemporary Art Month with Robert Tatum, back in 2004, called me up on a whim and said, hey, why don't you come down here and curate a show at the Wiggle Room, which was a space they were running not too far from where Flight Gallery in 1906 and all of that is now. And I said, well, that'd be great. I haven't been back to San Antonio for years, and it would be great to see everybody. 5 years had passed. I went down, we had this show. All these people from my past that I hadn't seen for 5 years come up to me, giving me hugs. They're like, where have you been? I haven't seen you out and about in a while. And I'm like, it's been 5 years. And I just kind of felt like this connection to San Antonio that I left behind, never thought I'd connect to again. But when I did, I was just like, there's something about this city that it feels good, and there's a community here that's supportive. And I went back and I just told my job in Chicago, I said, I'm going to move back to San Antonio, so I'm giving you a 9-month notice, I'm going to leave in November. And they were like, yeah, whatever. But it came and I left, and I moved to San Antonio, and I ran the gallery there for 2.5 years, almost 3 years, and I said, I'm moving, and I'm taking the gallery with me. They're like, where are you going? New York? LA? And I'm like, no, I'm going to San Antonio. And they're like, why are you going to San Antonio? And I'd be like, I'm not really sure, but something's driving me there. Well, the first 6 months I was here was horrible. It was just everything that could go wrong went wrong. The space where I wanted to open up the gallery it was a friend of mine lived in it, and she was going to move out, but she was moving into a house that was being gutted out. And so if anybody's ever done construction or gutted out a house, you know, the guys tell you, oh, May 1st it'll be ready, but really it's like June or July or August, right? So I'm like still waiting, going from house to house, like, can me and my cats live with you for a couple of weeks until my space opens up? And I met Mark Higginson, and we fell in love, and my space finally opened up, and when it did, he's like, don't move out. You should put the gallery in our duplex side. And I never, ever, ever even thought that was a possibility. So. And
Spontaneous was already across the street, right?
Well, the place where I was going to move was where John Mata lives now. Mm-hmm. It was a weird thing, like, you know, he had a breakup with his girlfriend, and then Mark and I decided to live together, and John's like, I need a place to stay, and I'm like, I know where you can live, because I was supposed to move into that spot. And I was literally supposed to move in that weekend, and Mark's like, don't go. And I'm like, okay. But I know somebody who can move into my spot. So Mike Casey, who's the landlord of Saladias and all of that, we made the connection.
Okay, so let's get back to where the location is now. So where is Unit B located?
It's located in Southtown, just 10-minute walk from the Alamo. We're just off of St. Mary's. If you know where the Monterey is, we're literally just around the corner.
So let's look at some of the images that you brought.
Yeah, sorry, I got off track.
That's okay. So tell us what we're looking at here.
Okay, this is the space in Chicago, the Unit B that was on Des Plaines Avenue in Chicago, and it operated there for 2.5 years, excuse me. The space was a little unique. It was a garden apartment, if you will. It was a 3-level apartment building. There were 3 units, and we were on the bottom floor. When I say we, I mean me and my 2 cats, who you'll see in pictures later. And the piece to the right was from a show that Raul Zamudio Taylor, a curator from New York, who had approached me out of the blue, just as like, I've seen great things about your space and I'd like to curate a show there. And this artist is Edgar Orlarenta, who's from Mexico, and this piece, it's one of my most favorite pieces that was exhibited at that space, and it's called The World Is My Soul's. And I thought it was a really beautiful piece. It's flip-flops cut off and embedded into the concrete in front of those steps to the gallery. And if we go to the next slide, just a few more shots of how the gallery, this is kind of a photograph of every corner of the space, kind of one big room that was in Chicago, and again, the space is kind of unique, and one of the challenges for the artists and sometimes for me curating shows was the checkerboard floor, which was cool for disco parties, but not always cool for curating exhibitions. But you know, the challenge and the fun thing about these domestic kind of artist-run spaces is the different challenges that they bring to the artists and the curators. And then in 2006, January, the space opened up here on Steeren Street, 500 Steeren Street here in San Antonio, where it's been going ever since. This is a show from 2009, I believe. It was called Landscapes versus Netscapes, and on the television, that old TV set that's in there, is a video by Kota Izawa, who's an artist from San Francisco, and on the wall is an artist from Austin, Joseph Phillips. And I don't know if you can tell from that picture, but it's kind of an aerial view of a neighborhood, and all of the houses are removed, and you just see like the pools and the yards and the kind of streetways. And this is the biggest wall in the gallery. We're a 2-room space, and the next few pictures are get kind of an idea of how the space is set up. It's in our current spot, it's 2 rooms. We have the living room space and a kitchen space, and then we have a yard just adjacent. This is our the show that was before the one that's opening tomorrow night. This is Ethel Shipton's work, who's a local artist here in San Antonio, from a show she had called Moments. And each one of these, she's constructing 1,440 panels that represents every second in a 24-hour period. She's at about 400-ish now, and she's been working on the series for a couple of years, so she'll be busy for a while. This is from a show in 2009 from a pair of artists who also exhibited at our space in Chicago. This is Matt Hanner's on the right with the kind of neon piece and the satellite-esque piece, and the rope piece on the left. And in the front room, that's the kitchen space, and in the living room space you see some potatoes on the floor. That's Stephen Laptasoffin's work, who's from Dallas now. They both lived in Chicago at one point, but they kind of split up, and Matt actually passed away last year of an aneurysm, very unexpected, but he lived in Indiana and Stephen lives in Dallas. This is from a show, I'm picking a lot of things from 2009, that I curated in the space called Let This Be a Sign, and it was 3 artists were on the show. Gary Sweeney did a big sign piece out in our yard. Christy Perez did this piece in the kitchen space, and Alejandro Diaz had some of his cardboard signs in our living room space. This was from a show also in 2009. On the facade of our space, an artist, these are actually screen prints that he did and then soaked in wax. They're on really, really thin paper, and then he applied them to the windows of the gallery space. Tom Clinton from Grand Rapids, Michigan. I met him at an artist residency that I did in Saugatuck at Oxbow. This is of a show in 2009. This is.
It was a good year for you.
Yeah, I guess so. I had some of the best pictures, I guess. This was a show called This Is For Real. That was kind of a collaboration of 3 artists that worked kind of very differently. Joey Farso, Guion Shoshbury, and Leslie Frazier. They're very good friends and grew up together, but they're all artists and do very individual work. But they got together and curated the space with different little drawings and things that they did. And in the kitchen space, which you don't see in this shot, obviously, is they made cardboard examples of themselves standing in a kitchen with like 80s jackets on, and one was playing the flute and one was playing the guitar. There was a violin case on the floor where people were throwing money into it, and there was music, really kind of annoying music playing in the background. But it was a fun show. Unit B, we have 6 shows a year, 5 to 6 shows a year, 3 of which I curate, and then 2 to 3 I invite curators to come down and curate the space. This was curated by a gallery space in Austin called OK Mountain, and that's Faith Gay's work, the installation work on the left, and Ben Aqua, who's a photographer from Austin, on the right. This was from one of my most favorite shows. I think Justin Parr's in one of these pictures. I think that's you on the floor rolling around, Justin.
I think it is.
This was from a show in 2010, woohoo, we moved on to 09, called Animalities that had 2 artists in the show. This is work by Chris Wildrick, who's from Champaign, Illinois, and all of the work in the space is for and about cats. He did kind of this study of like, what would it be like to be a cat? And he had photographs exhibited around the gallery of him like jumping on and off things, like on fire hydrants and off of porches. And then in the gallery, which is a very small space, he had all these kind of like toy-like things for like how high could, if you were a cat, could you jump? And so he had all these like different stands with targets on them, so you could try to see if you could actually jump on them. And some people could, some people couldn't. All the kind of twine that's hanging has little balls on the bottom. And what you're supposed to do, you know how a cat can like walk by anything and never touch it? You know, it just moves its body in a way. His challenge for people was to go through these spaces without making any of the bells ding. So there was a mat on the floor where you could take a cat nap, and you could set a timer to take a cat nap. It was a really fun show. Outside of that same show, a New York artist, this is in our yard, which is just adjacent to the gallery. We have a pretty big chunk of yard there. Available for parties, no, I'm just kidding. But she came in from New York, and she made these giant longhorn cutouts, and they remained in our yard until a few rain and windstorms knocked them down, and we put them back up and kind of glued them back together, and then they finally just, they didn't last anymore. But a great piece from Emily Landon in New York. This was from a show that someone here curated named Richard Tights. It was called Convergences, and it was in January of last year. And Larry Graeber's work, who's the red piece in front.
And Larry Graeber is also one of the original Sonoma artists.
Yay! And not very well seen here, but the white kind of clear piece and the yellow piece is Jessica Ramirez's piece. Yay! This was from a show that Nasrudest Collective did in the gallery. They pretty much took over the whole space. We, like Justin and Rex and a lot of people do, the artist-run spaces, we pretty much give artists free reign and the permission to do what they need to do. If they want to paint the gallery black, we're like, oh, okay. But you know, we'll paint over it with some kills and all that stuff. But yeah, that was a really great show. They really took over the space. This was a show that was curated by Dennis Scholl in 2008. Dennis Scholl is a collector from Miami. I used to work at Art Pace, so I had some connections to some people that kind of passed through there. Dennis had came to our space and was really impressed with what Unit B and what San Antonio was doing with our artist-run spaces here, and he asked me if he could curate a show at the space, and it was the one and only time in the history of Unit B that this gigantic art moving truck pulled up in front of our gallery one day and said, how are we going to get this piece in your tiny door? The piece, I can't really, that looks kind of like corks there. The left piece next to the two guys hugging there, just to the right of that, is all, it's a 10 by 10 piece, I'm sorry, a 9 by 9 piece of wine corks. They're all wine corks. So the gallery had this kind of smell about it that was really kind of intoxicating, if you will. The artist that's cooking chicken wings down there, that's the artist who made the piece, and all of his artwork kind of deals with food and taste. The piece on the bottom to the left there is, he's getting the alcohol out of the wine in that piece. He had it lit up and was giving little samples of it, and it really tasted awful. But he made up for it. If you went outside, he was cooking, he did a performance piece called Left Wing, Right Wing, where he was making chicken wings and serving them to people who came. And Tao Ray and all of these artists were from Miami, young artists, emerging artists that Dennis kind of supported and believed in. So Dennis, who's a big time collector in Miami, brought all these great artists down, and he paid for every single thing. It was a really, really beautiful, beautiful thing that he did for such a tiny little.
Great example of patronage.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. This was from the 2009 show, Let This Be a Sign, just our backyard. Gary Sweeney did a great piece back there, and this is just kind of what happens at our openings. We have this big yard to the side, and everybody kind of congregates for a couple of hours.
It's a great, it has a high hangout ability.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
We also have some other fun events. In the summertime, we kind of shut down because it's hot. So that July and August month, we do some events in the yard. And this was in July a couple of years ago. The Final Run-Ins, who's a kind of a punk rock art band. They're defunct now. I think they did like 5 shows and then called it quits in the true fashion of punk rock bands. But they would do like 20-minute sets, and they wouldn't play any encores. And they'd come in and bam, 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 and the songs were over and they were done, like in and out in an hour. It was great. But they came down and they performed in the space, and every space, and they only performed in art spaces. They performed at Art Pace, they performed at Unit B, they performed somewhere in Germany, and a couple of spaces in New York. And the 3 fellows were artists, and that was my dog, Manja. May he rest in peace. But they played actually inside of the gallery space, and we have a very tiny space. But they set up these scenes, and in our particular performance area, it was Jacques Cousteau. So everything, they hung all these curtains and made like these fish cutouts, and they were hanging from the ceiling. So it was kind of an aquatic experience, if you will. But they played punk rock. There were people packed in the gallery. The windows were open, and people were packed outside looking in. It's a lot of fun.
Movies, right? Videos.
Yeah, the movie bus. Remember that?
Yeah.
The circulatory system, a video bus from Austin. You pay their gas, and they'll come down and show really great videos from artists that they're promoting from Texas, not just Austin, but from Texas in general. And they have seating on the bus, and they'll give you a beer. You come on and get on the bus, and it just parks right out in front of the gallery. We kind of have them come when we have openings and closings. I'm not sure they're doing this anymore, but they came down 3 times. Plus the video jam here in San Antonio, they've done a few outings in the yard too. We have a pretty big yard, so just bring your blankie or your lawn chair. We are one of the official host sites for the International Pancake Film Festival. I know you've all heard of it. An artist, Damon Bishop, who's seen there cooking pancakes, biannually he started this event in Chicago. He's one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life, but he's a video artist, and he loves pancakes. So he dedicated a film festival to anybody. You can be an amateur or a professional, to put together a less than 3-minute video. The impetus has to be about pancakes. It has to be, I think he said 73% about pancakes.
So when's the next one?
Well, we just had one this past year, so it'll be in 2014 will be the next one.
So,
and he does a big call for entries, and he usually has 4 or 5 venues that he goes to in that year. Him and his
so
wife
start
just kinda
thinking
set
about
up.
the videos you're going to make about
Yes,
pancakes. Yes,
absolutely. There's some good ones. And lastly, this is just a shot. We have kind of matinee closings. Our shows are up for about 2 months, and we have a big opening usually on the kind of 3rd Friday of each month. except for Contemporary Art Month. We're having ours on Saturday, so we couldn't miss this great event tonight. We have our closings from 3 to 5, and this is just a little shot of our closings. I thought it'd be a nice closing shot for our conversation here too.
So,
between me and you.
so that's it. Then thank you,
That's it.
Kimberly Aubuchon. Next, we'll hear from Rex Hausmann. Yeah, welcome, Rex.
Hi.
So, tell us a little bit about how did the Hausmann Millworks. First of all, why is it called the Millworks, and how did it start?
Well, I brought a little friend with me. This is Sebastian the cat, wishing y'all all the best of business from Hong Kong. So he's gonna sit right here. We started the Millworks about 2007-ish, and we named it the Hausmann Millworks actually in honor of my dad and my mom. It's because of their millwork company that we had the buildings, and they ran an architectural millwork.
So it's in the buildings that house the Millworks,
Yes,
right?
so the Millworks, the Hausmann Millworks. That's really where we came up with our name. And then this is my dad's actually old logo, which used to be 2 crossed planes. And then I took out one of the planes and made a bougainvillea, which is in our front flower pot, and a little star, which is that little glimmer of hope that you just kind of start something and hope it happens and grows. And if you see on the front of our building, it says grow where you planted, because a lot of, the other cities are always kind of pulling you, go to New York, go to LA, go to. I was like, why can't you just grow from where you're from, and that's really.
And where is the Millworks located?
It's in Alta Vista, which is right there.
Same neighborhood than where Sonoma was.
Yes. Alta Vista, real close to San Antonio College, about probably 3 blocks away.
And when is the Millworks open?
The Millworks is open pretty much all the time if you know someone on the inside that has a studio, or by appointment for the gallery.
Would you elaborate when you say studio? So in addition to being an exhibition
Yes.
space, tell us about that.
A big part of our gallery component really was driven by trying to engage the studios in what really interesting artwork is. So the hope and the idea, at least the initial idea for the gallery, was to bring in contemporary art from either the local community or elsewhere that would somewhat educate the people that are there, as well as invite people in to come and see what's being made.
So, but when you say studios, you actually have artist studios in the complex?
Yeah, we have about 24 studios right now that are filled.
And how many artists are there currently?
We have about 26 or so.
That's great.
Everything from glass makers to painters and photographers and sculptors, and even a capoeira dance group.
So I've noticed you call yourself a creative community.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that?
Creative community just kind of denotes the idea of being around other people. So just by having someone next to your studio, be like, who's that guy or who's that lady? And everybody knows the famous story of Jasper Johns getting found by going to Robert Rauschenberg's studio with Leo Castelli. And that's just kind of a little hope of something of the mill.
But also you have a sense of community, you have a place for dialogue.
Oh, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's people that, everybody kind of knows everybody and works with everybody. And we've had different people come in and go out, but there's a lot of people that have stayed for about 4 to 5 years, and it's really great.
Mm-hmm. But you still accept new people, right?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, well let's look at some of the images you brought us.
That's the front of our building. It's kind of a nondescript building. It's 4 warehouses. It takes up a whole city block. It's 44,000 square feet, and it's big. And this is the Russell Street side, which is building A, which is a lot of our climate-controlled studios and a bulk of our studio program. And that's my brother's Jag Winston, which is an awesome car. I love it. It breaks all the time.
So cars seem to be a sub-theme in tonight's presentation. Okay. All right, so this is the location, right?
That's a little map. We're in Alta Vista, and you can see the little arrow, I think, pointing. Ta-da! Alta Vista is actually a very tiny neighborhood within Beacon Hill. It's kind of surrounded by everything, But we're really close to the park, which is quite beautiful. So what are we? We're a place for creativity in a city block. We're studios for artists. We have all different kinds of art there. We have an exhibition space, and a commercial gallery. Danville Chadbourne shows up right now, which is a fantastic show. and we're going to be showing Carla Veliz as well as Fernando Andrade and Oscar Salazar. And we believe that it's an exchange within the San Antonio community.